as I lay in observation of the world, suspended while pondering the notion put forth by those of the Aryan movement. Thought directed upon the thoughts that lay behind the eyes of those in forwarding the agenda, possibilities of what spurred the movement, what drove it. Do any truths lay behind what many dismiss at first glance, not wanting to be associated with what is deemed as troubled thinking, leading to even more troubled action? To patronize the hypothesis put forward by those proponents of the above-stated movement, may even be viewed by some to have already gone down the road which leads to bigoted lies, but in this proposal, using rational thought, along with logical reasoning, explanations will be explored in conjunction to what has been stated, along with the utmost of care to keep rationale non-emotional, provoke not toward notions spurred by self-defensive, keeping causation and statistical analysis at the forefront of the conversation. The evolution of man has been scrutinized by the most celebrated minds throughout history, most recently being accepted by the masses that modern man has descended from a divergence with our primate relatives, at some point in time along the intertwining branches of the tree of life, somewhere within the continent of Africa. The morphological features following what Darwin has proposed, that which is most suited for the environment in which the organism is found. The features of man having been argued to at one point in time to harbor as much of a hairy appearance covering the skin for protection from the elements, what color lay beneath originally, and the reasons for the loss of hair ranging slightly among experts. Some have argued that examples given from a wide array of species show that creatures covered in hair, most likely have skin tones of a lighter nature when observed upon through the visible light spectrum, organisms committing only to that which forwards the chance of increased fitness, and with a furry covering, melanin production would not be a necessity. The evolution of man, when viewed upon today in its diversity, is widely characteristic of the coevolution to man, and man's environment. Some have proposed that man's loss of a hairy exterior is due primarily to aquatic habits, possibly in conjunction with the origination and continued use of fashioned clothing, limiting the usefulness of a hairy body, thus, generationally, eliciting a change in the species coding genes, having a profound effect morphologically, and possibly phenotypically. As man lost his natural covering permitting him to stand the elements, man had to be ingenuitive in regards toward survival, in relation the environment man was within, different environments, either directing changes in accordance to overcoming the environment with thought-fashioned object, or with natural features. Looking at the migration patterns accepted by scholars, man then went north, while some stays behind in the moderate climate of African regions, not extremely taxing on the already formed body and its features, not eliciting much change, other than an increased melanin production to counteract the prolonged exposure to the sun's ultraviolet rays. The factions that went north, and split from there, had to change drastically within a short period of time to survive, and that meant fashioning themselves with an almost separating shell from the cold winters and harsh environment. Not being in direct exposure of the sun for prolonged periods of time, while still requiring to interact with the environment, clothing and other tools were required to be fashioned for man's survival. We can now see that generationally, in short enough of time for man to not be genetically different enough to form a blockade between reproduction among ethnicities, but long enough for morphological features to have changed among populations experiencing the different environments to have occurred. Man is now something of variety, while still being partly similar, only really seen now in species selectively bred by humans such as dogs, cats, and a limited number of other species mostly falling within farmed use. With the difference in environments, not only is the present man changed, but where this man goes, is now changed, for what man occupies his time with, will not only be different, but cause further differences down the line. following Darwin's rule of that which is most suited for the environment, be dominant in it. Now, man has become so fashioned for the world, from it, that he has the ability to alter it, not only changing the environment, but what is then most suited for it, changing then what man will present itself with advantages in it, changing then, future man. Changing course in our discussion, with relevance to the journey with which we have just taken, we will now talk in regards towards intelligence, what it is, how do we measure it, and where is it going? Intelligence among many is usually associated with some sort of educational test, such as the SAT, or the ACT, giving scores showing the individual's ability to recognize ideas, solutions for ideas, and to exercise the creative thought process to create new ideas. Understanding concepts, their application, and furthering conceptual enlightenment. Intelligence can be associated further with Darwin's principle, drawing upon the organism's ability on a whole, to take advantage of its environment, the collective intelligence of an organism if you will, not only in regards to forward thinking, introspection, and self-recognition and differentiation from external environment, but the ability on a whole for the collective ability of the organism's cells to accomplish tasks, which of course, changes with environment, showing us that intelligence is something that is changing as well. So, morphological features could show us what environment an organism is most suited for, displaying then its intelligence in regards to said environment, but is there an example of an organism which can intelligently interact in multiple environments, remaining the apex of the whatever environment they find themselves in? A truly intellectual giant among us? Man, historically, and in the present, is the only organism which displays such characteristics, with dismissal of organisms such as the water bear, surviving itself in an extremely wide range of environments, but showing still an inability to communicate beyond its own mere reaction to chemical stimulus from the environment, which when stated as such, displays the notion that man himself is only capable of that level of communication, as we are all merely chemically reactive to environment stimulus reacting within our biology. Animals such as this, among many microorganisms, and classifications of living forms, may not have the capacity to alter their interactions with the environment, utilizing tools, but are they themselves the tool, showing collective intelligence, rather than consciously problem solving? The problem solving is done on a subconscious level, but does this describe decreased intelligence? Further muddling of man's superiority of the animal kingdom, by discussing the intricacies of ordering levels of intelligence, is not in the scope of this study, but is an area of interest in regards to those seeking to describe what true intelligence is. To then further indulge those proponents of a superior race, would be in a sense to describe intelligence as that which is the most intelligent, no matter where one is, which as displayed above, is directly related to environment and circumstance. Proposals, however, state that the ascension of man to man's peak, directly influenced by environment, to being able to overcome environment, and change it, is associated most with frontal lobe cognition. Arguments stemming from the notion that as man moved north, and was separated by ice walls, man had to hide indoors, and come up with ways in which to not only survive, but to take up time which would otherwise be experienced through bliss of ignorance in experience of the environment of paradise. The arts and expression could be argued to have originated with the isolation of man, to overcome the rigid conditions of isolation, along with contemplation. Another proponent is non-discriminant in regards toward environment, and almost favorable for a fruitful region, for as man was able to be fed by the world, with more than was needed, with advancement in areas such as organized farming, transportation, social hierarchy and delegation, man was then given time to explore it, instead of being enslaved to the survival of it. Most likely, the advancement of man existed in both regions, and was in reality different, showing us examples of our above conclusions in thought, and also in the historical and architectural records. Quite possibly a hybrid between the two, spurring ingenuity to overcome natural obstacles, then enjoyment of a fruitful time, where necessity is met, and whimsical desires can then be pursued. However, where is man going, and what environment is most strenuous on the mind, furthering the advancement of it? As a need to survive, rather than merely a choice of freedom for whimsical travel. One could argue that as the world becomes more technologically advanced, people are sheltered more and more for the external and natural environment, favoring an artificial one within walls, vehicles, and under roofs, where intellectual advancement is not only taught, but forwarded. What features do man are most suited for this environment, and to those that conquer this environment, will their collective intellect hold true as they travel to other environments, showing them dominance over the rest. Looking now at examples in nature, rather than hypothetical thought and reason, the characteristics of animals living in such conditions would be similar to those within deep caves, or underground, which display no investment within melanin production, so to say that this is comparative to man, would not be so far of a stretch. However, another obstacle of definition presents itself within our journey, as we describe technical advancement, as cultural advancement, is to truly be advanced, representative of the technology displayed. In what sense is societal structure, and other experiences of those most suited for an environment taken into place, though we are trying to understand what we are not? Is it possible that if life is about fulfillment of experience within it, that something appearing to be primitive, is actually more advanced than the technological and intellectual one in which we ourselves experience? Or would the lack of these introspective values take away what give us our consciousness and ability to appreciate it? In this study, rather than coming to an exact solution to the outlined and aforementioned topic, a clear and direct solution has not necessarily been found, but has been in fact complicated, as we could also factor into things such as selective breeding for reasons illogical to mere survival, and in regards to aesthetic preference, as is displayed by many species seeking mere appearance, rather than perfect function, where then within the caste, intelligence could then be displayed as beauty, and as we all know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. As time goes on though, I do believe that the term white will no longer be a term for those specifically hailing from the Caucasus region. Evidence for mistaken encounters with white men throughout the early exploration of the Americas is already a documented phenomenon in some of the few tribes designated as civilized, as has been throughout history in regards toward architectural practice, and socio-economic classes of peoples within these regions. For as the human race pursues advancement in the technological world, through continued education, where the storehouse that is knowledge itself, is found hidden from the sun, generationally, cultures and populations around the world, seeking such pursuits, will themselves reflect their own behaviors, becoming then lighter in tone, as mating habits reflect attraction towards those with similar desires, interests, and backgrounds. Someone traveling the globe will already see this trend taking place among cultures, with a significant difference showing itself between population literacy and color of skin, while the designated term of white may no longer in the future be utilized to distinguish a specific population of humans diverging from the Caucasus. Other features worldwide can still be seen as difference among many cultures. This ranging from the eye, ranging in shape hypothesized to be related to inland or coastal habitats, to height, to other characteristics of a morphological nature such as proportional distancing between regions and such things of more prominence from one to the next, showing that more factors are at play in regards to beneficial features for a region. However, I do believe that as time goes on, and there becomes more of an interconnected global society, becoming similar and almost one in desire and behavior, an emergence of a global class highly similar in nature will become apparent, separating itself from specific regions, not jumping on board with the changes of society. Will man resemble something alien to us, in not too far off future? One may question what the next great advancement within human biology will be, and during this age it seems two predominant theories present themselves among leading experts. One is that biotechnological modifications will take place, or that bioengineering will receive major breakthroughs and allow the specific conscious modification of the human biology on the molecular level, to the degree in which biology could be engineered as such, to accomplish any desires that would be accomplished through body modification along the lines of a cyborg, with much more of a natural feel, possibly being more aesthetic and synergetic with the already biological human form. Will man take decisive action in regards to his own evolution on a visual scale observable during one's own life? Or will man continually alter his environment one generation at a time, altering the successive generations upon a much more gradual pathway? And which pathway will man choose, or will he choose many? Will this new man then find himself altering that which isn't to his own benefit, for his own sake, as this form spreads, being not ultimately suited for that which is found, but that which is made to suit? Will this show lack of collective intelligence, as this being is now restricted to an isolated environment, not being able to acclimatize shortly to differing situations rapidly? Is then this evidence that man is already at his finest, with nowhere to go without being dumped down and restricted, isolated, locked in a cage of darkness, only seeing through a looking glass? Maybe man will never be beyond what he is now, as what is best continually changes with the wind, keeping man changing as well, keeping man from being dumb, by being only man, and not men, able to intermix with what seems different, for the betterment of difference, finding the common ground, to allow man to remain on top as a whole. A jack of all is a master of what? Other than being a jack of all. The definition of man, as diverse as man himself, a living reef, full of color, only accentuating the picture, rather than detracting from it, showing us that the ascension of man relies upon the range of man, and not a particular man. One then has to ask themselves, as this proposal has mainly been in regards towards mankind being shaped by the most effective and energy-efficient form in regards to the demands placed upon man by nature and environment, along with the desires of mankind shaping his environment, but what will mankind become, when energy efficiency itself isn't necessarily a main concern for man's biological form, as man is able to engineer his form to the same degree, in which man expresses himself artistically with the brush, choosing whimsically the features of what man is to be, not necessarily a product of environment, without perhaps loss of any desired characteristic exclusive within expression of one facet. Brain versus brawn, one may not need to sacrifice one for another, being intelligent in successful action with regards to both. One might then more so find themselves asking, what is man? Only to discover that man himself is then less man, and more an ideal, shaping the clay himself, which shaped him. Visions of the Sistine Chapel take place, where God, the acting forces of the universe, shape the pinnacle of the acting force upon the universe, man, the Vitruvian man in view, as the harmonious manifestation within the geometric pattern of the heavens, directing the motion of bodies here on earth, and as man himself comes together toward a common goal, becoming then the acting intelligence shaping himself, man then touches God, as man shapes what shapes man.